Welcome back to the Build Beyond podcast. For this episode, I am going to give you a very short and concise checklist for how to be healthy. I'm going to preface this. I'm open to being wrong, and I'm probably going to leave some things out. I'm talking about low-hanging fruit. I'm talking about the stuff that is really going to move the needle for you. I think a lot of people, this is just my observation, they spend time and money, so they invest resources into things that are healthy, I guess, in the healthy realm, but don't meaningfully change their health in a significant way. So they're stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies, I think is the best way to describe it. But I'm going to go over the $100 bills today. So if you're curious, here's your checklist. I think, and this checklist is not going to be in any particular order. So this is what I would say. I'm gonna make a check, help you make this checklist. And then the idea for you would be to look at the checklist and think about one thing that you could work on. So what's the best first step? And I think long term, you're going to need to address all of these, but you don't have to address them all at once. And you don't have to address any one of them first. Right? You can pick whatever you want. So let's start with physical activity and physical fitness. If we're just going to talk about just general physical activity, increasing activity, I don't think anyone can debate this and the benefits of physical activity, especially routine physical activity. And this, if we could bottle up the benefits of routine physical activity, it would be a miracle drug. So you can affect your mood, you can improve your sleep, you can slow the effects of aging, and that could be increased bone density, increased lean muscle mass, decreased effects of arthritic changes, you name it. You can decrease your risk for Alzheimer's and dementia. You can decrease your risk for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and some kinds of cancer. You can affect your immune system. So you can help decrease the risk for infection. And if you do get an infection, you can speed up your recovery or decrease the symptoms. You can improve your sleep quality. I think I've already mentioned that. You can affect your energy, and it improves cognitive function, retention, and it just makes your life better. So if you want all of those benefits or any of those things sound great, well, increasing general physical activity, so doing anything, can move you in that direction. We can measure general physical activity with walking. So I would say, depending on the source, anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000 steps a day is going to be ideal. If you're thinking about step count as a way of measuring your general physical activity, what I would recommend is that you just track your steps for a week or two and see where you're at. And then we use that as your baseline and we see what we can do to increase your step count. You can do simple things. You can park, instead of parking in the nearest parking spot, park in the farthest parking spot. And instead of using the closest restroom at work, use the furthest restroom that you can find when you're at work. Just find creative ways to increase your step count. If you do that over a long enough period of time, we're increasing general physical activity. And that's good. If we're thinking about physical activity and exercise, we can break it down a little bit further and we can talk about cardio. Improving your VO2 max is important. Improving your cardio has so many benefits. And it's not hard to do. You just got to jack up your heart rate. So I would look at, again, setting a baseline. How much cardio do you actually do? Moderate or vigorous cardio. So that is maybe you're sweating. Maybe it's difficult to hold a conversation because your heart rate's up so high and your breathing rate's up so high enough where it's you can still talk, but it's hard to communicate or uncomfortable to communicate. I think if you're up in that range, you definitely know that your heart and your lungs are working. And if they're working, you are going to provoke them into adapting and changing for the better. Ideally, you're getting anywhere from, I don't know, what is it, like 75 to 150 minutes per week of an elevated heart rate. If we're still talking about exercise, we're looking at strength training. So 2 to 3 times per week. Doesn't have to be at the gym, doesn't have to be with weights. It can be body weight stuff, either trying to get stronger or to maintain a relatively high level of strength. Now, if you're doing all of those things, you want to find ways to keep doing them. So it doesn't do a lot of good to go for a couple months and then take a few months off and then a couple months, although that is better than nothing. We're looking for some type of consistency. Okay, so we have general physical activity, exercise, strength training, cardio. I would lump that into one thing on your checklist. Another thing on your checklist is sleep. Sleep is probably the best thing we can do to reset our brain and our body each day. It is essential. If you give me someone who's super healthy and doesn't have any pain and there's nothing going on, and I start disrupting their sleep, they're not gonna perform as well. They're not gonna feel as good. They're gonna have less energy. It's going to start to affect a lot of different things within the body. So sleep quality and sleep duration are important. There are a lot of things we can do for this. Some people may benefit from a sleep study. I think sleep apnea may be more common than what a lot of people think. Even if you don't have sleep apnea, we're looking at ways to improve sleep quality. There's a lot of things that we can do for that. And I've got checklists upon checklists for sleep stuff. But you want to start to think, do you have high quality sleep? Is it long enough, and is it good enough quality? So we've got general physical activity, exercise, and our second thing on the checklist is sleep. The third thing we want to talk about is nutrition. And this is such a broad topic. It gets really confusing. So let's make this very simple. It seems like the people who do the best, if you look at big enough populations, are the people who don't overeat. So step one is we need to find a way to not overeat. That's going to help obviously reduce obesity, which has a whole nother list of problems. Now, it's easy to say, oh, just eat less, but that's really hard to do. So if you're on board with this and you say, yes, I need to control the amount of calories, what I'm eating, how do I do that? It seems for a lot of people, the best way to do that is to focus on the quality of the food, because higher quality food tends to be more filling. Now, what do I mean by higher quality food? I would say higher quality food would be foods that are less processed. I don't want to demonize processed food because, for example, whey protein is ultra processed, but I don't think anyone's having any health issues because they're just ODing on whey protein. So the fact that food is processed is not the problem. It's that most or so much processed food is high in sugar, high in salt. It's not very filling. It's really low in vitamins and minerals. It tends to be low in protein, low in fiber, and because it's so easy to eat and consume, your calories go way up. So we're trying to avoid those foods, and we're trying to decrease our total caloric intake. So I would focus on foods that are whole foods if you can. So fresh, canned, or frozen. You're looking for things that are higher in protein, higher in fiber. And, you can double dip too, because most plant sources of fiber are also relatively high in protein. The nice thing about protein and fiber is that they're filling. So people will tend to eat less. They can eat less. I think it's hard to overeat high fiber, high protein foods. This in the same way that it's easier to overeat foods that are lower in fiber, lower in protein, but higher in sugar. So what I would say by higher quality foods, we're looking at selecting foods that are higher in protein, higher in fiber, and lower in sugar. If we can eliminate added sugar altogether, that would be great. I'm not demonizing fruit, but I'm looking at those things that are, you know what I'm talking about. Soda, snacks, things like that. So if we can eat higher protein, higher fiber, lower sugar, you're on the right track. And we're trying to keep those calories, trying to keep you from over consuming. Diet gets a lot more intricate than that. I wouldn't take this as a dietary prescription. This is just information. So if you think you have something that's unique about your health where you might require something more specific, don't listen to what I'm saying and go talk to a professional who can help you with that. But in general, most people are going to do better, higher protein, higher fiber, lower sugar. And it's not that we see a lot of protein deficiency as like at a pathological level, at least in the United States. But as I said, selecting foods that are higher in protein and higher in fiber and lower in sugar, it just, people tend to do better. So we've got increasing physical activity. So we're looking at step count. We're looking at strict training 2 to 3 days per week, and we're looking at cardio, moderate to vigorous cardio. We're looking at improving sleep quality and duration of sleep, and we're looking at affecting the diet by selecting foods that are more or less processed, higher in fiber, higher in protein, and lower in sugar. Something else we can do is that we can think about stress management. I feel like stress and anxiety, we all experience these feelings, but they're getting more and more common. And I think I can't say they're getting more and more common because I don't have stats on that. It seems like with the way social media and now with AI, and we are attached to social media, we are attached to electronics, we are attached to the news, and very little of that is positive. And I feel like that constant access to those things is affecting people. And that's not just my observation. I think most people can agree with that. So finding ways to detach from the virtual world and make those more human connections, hanging out with friends and family. I think this dealing with the stress and the anxiety and everything, with everything that's going on in the world, I personally think that your relationship with God plays a huge role in that. And so I'm going to say stress management, mental health is one thing on the checklist, and another thing on the checklist I'm going to say is a relationship with God. There are some people out there who are atheists or agnostic, and you can obviously omit that from your checklist. I would highly recommend that you consider it, and just maybe you put it at the end of your checklist. And then something that, if you've gone through everything and you feel like you've checked all the boxes and you still feel like you're missing something, then that relationship with God it's a good thing to explore. I'm not here to be preachy to anyone, but I think that I believe that it's on my checklist. That's all I'm saying. And the cool thing about having that relationship with God and developing that is that it helps with all these other things. So, that might be number one for a lot of people, especially if you don't have that relationship yet or you've been ignoring it. So let's see what's on the checklist. We've got physical activity and exercise, nutrition, sleep, managing mental health, relationship with God. That's 5 things. I think that's a good checklist. Let's leave it at 5. I don't know too many people who have all of that checked off and it's all good. Someone had asked me one time, what do I do when a person walks into my office and they're in pain and there's nothing really going on with them? What do we do? And I'm like, so someone comes in and they don't have any stress or anxiety. Their relationships are great. They're eating a well-balanced diet, low in sugar, high in fiber, high in protein. They're meeting the physical activity guidelines. They're sleeping really well. There are very few people out there like that. I don't know anyone like that. I'm not like that. So I feel like we're always a work in progress. And there are some of these basic things that if you're not addressing the 5 things that I've just talked about, and you're doing other things, I'm not saying the other things aren't good or aren't valuable, but in many cases, as I said before, you're stepping over $100 bills to pick up pennies. So what are some of these pennies? Most supplements, I think, are pennies. It's not that they're worthless. They're just, the value is relatively low. Now, that is unless you have some type of crazy deficiency or you've got some kind of condition where you need the supplement. But most people are, I don't want to say most people. There are a lot of people out there who are taking supplements that they don't need, and they're just urinating out their hard-earned money. I am speaking from experience. I've gone down that road. I think there are a lot of people out there doing routine cleanses that probably have very little positive effect on you. I think there are a lot of people out there getting unnecessary tests, like consistent blood work, that's not really being used appropriately. Maybe it's just to sell cleanses and whatever else, whatever supplements people are trying to sell. What are some other pennies that are out there? As a chiropractor, I got into chiropractic because I had always been told by chiropractors that adjusting the spine has effects on overall health. I went to chiropractic school and I chose this profession because I truly believe that, because that's all I'd ever been told. And it sounded plausible. I obviously don't believe that right now. So I think people who are going out seeing a chiropractor, getting their necks and their backs cracked routinely just because they believe that it promotes health. I'm not going to sit here and say that it doesn't. I can just tell you that there is very, very little evidence that it does. So I would consider that to be a penny. And I know a lot of people, honestly, who go to the chiropractor regularly and they take their supplements regularly and they do their juice cleanses and whatever other biohacks that they've got going on, which is fine. Those things are probably harmless and they might provide some benefit, but a lot of these people I know who do this stuff, they don't meet physical activity guidelines, so they don't strength train 2 to 3 days per week. They're not doing enough cardio. They're not really maximizing the capacity of their heart and their lungs. They may not be sleeping well. If I go through that checklist of 5 things, that they're missing some key elements of health. So again, you can pick up pennies all you want, but don't step over those $100 bills. We got to look at those and think about, okay, how can I work on this? I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I would put on this list. On my list of 5, I would say getting outside is probably a big one. It's hard, and I live in the Midwest, so in the wintertime, it's just miserable, but I just feel like I'm not an advocate for like necessarily going out and getting a ton of sun exposure, but being outside, being in the sun regularly, there are going to be some benefits to that. Whether you're wearing sunscreen or not wearing sunscreen, I just think there's something to be said about being a healthy person and enjoying nature and being outside and breathing fresh air and doing those things. So if you have the ability, you have access to that, I would put that, maybe that's number 6 but that kind of goes along with getting detached from the virtual world and getting detached from the screens. It also goes along with your relationship with God, because you're going out there and you're enjoying God's creation. So maybe that's number 6, getting outside more. I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I don't think so. I mean, there are other things, but that if I was just going to look for like my top 5 or top 6, that's what it is. Those are $100 bills. You could take those to the bank. If you are doing all of those things and everything's checked off, it doesn't mean you're not going to have some health problems, and it's not going to mean that you're necessarily going to live to be 100. And there are people who don't check all those boxes who live long lives, so it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. But if I was a betting man, I would say that I would bet on people who to be healthier and enjoy life more if they're taking a lot of steps, if they get outside regularly, if they're resistance training a couple times a week, if they're getting their heart rate up, if they're trying to eat a diet that's low in sugar, higher in protein, higher in fiber, decreasing the amount of ultra processed foods and trying to increase the minimally processed foods, people who are trying to improve their sleep and making whatever changes they need to get better quality sleep, and people who are detaching from their screens, and people who are, as I said, getting outside, people who are fostering good relationships with other human beings, and people who are really working on or concerned with their relationship with God. I think that is a very good ingredient list and recipe for health. Maybe not complete, but it'll get you a long way. So go through that list, see where you're deficient, and it doesn't matter where you start, just pick somewhere and then do what you can. Think about what is the best first step for this item that I want to focus on, and then just go do that and do it over and over again, and then go through the list. All right, I hope this is helpful. Thanks for listening.